self-actualization.
Realize that everything connects to everything else.
But the more of the control problem that we solve in advance, the better the odds that the transition to the machine intelligence era will go well.
Have you ever asked what is the root of money?
And I think that loving learning is something that students do struggle with because of the way the education system kind of works now.
We do not have limited resources. We have limited ideas of how to allocate and use the resources that we have.
Signaling devices abound, helping people reliably convey otherwise hidden information.
The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter.
The ABCs of Psychology, a Ferret Institute production. Let us start now.
All right. Hi, AJax. How are you doing today?
It's been good.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and give a quick introduction about yourself, and then we'll kind of jump in here and talk about the world.
Yeah. So the name's AJax. I'm still in school right now. It's my second year of my junior year in college. I'm from China. I go to school in High Point University, North Carolina, and yeah, I major in human relation, anthropology, have a minor in sales.
All right.
And that's pretty much it.
Very good. And so I think we met, what was it, maybe back in 2014, 2015? I can't really remember.
Yeah, sometime like that.
You were getting ready to go abroad. And I guess, I kind of stepping back and looking at it, why did you or your family decide it was a good idea to go study abroad?
It's always been like a dream, part of the plan for me, life plan in general, that we want to go and pursue a degree in the U.S. And yeah, it just kind of goes along with the plan.
All right, perfect. Do you know the next step after that plan yet?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna get a job to do sales for some hopefully international companies, so I can bounce back and forth, in China and in the U.S. And yeah, that's my plan for now.
I think that's a very good idea. I think that's what I'm doing as well. That's a good phrase, bouncing back between China and America. Those flights aren't fun, but the two different cultures are. So
yeah.
And then in terms of, picking High Point, how did you, there's tons of schools. How did you find out about High Point, and how did you decide to go there?
It's pretty different in China and in U.S., like in terms of how people find out about schools and stuff. In China, you have people making a living basically just finding informations about schools in the U.S. and then I also have people help you to prepare for SAT, TOEFL, stuff like that. So they will hook you up with schools based on how well you do on those tests, and also they will chat with you a couple of times, see what kind of schools you like, what do you have in mind, and stuff like that. And yeah, in my case, they just happened to match me with a couple of popular big state school and High Point. And yeah, that's when I decided, well, if we already have like a load of Chinese kids in those big state university, how about we just be one of those mavericks and just, made a slightly different change to the landscape.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good that you, and I think that's one of the things that has impressed me early on with you is that you always take maybe the road less traveled, or you try to challenge yourself a little bit, which I think is a good characteristic that you have. And so your time at High Point so far, it sounds like you like it. What are some of the best things that you enjoy about the school, but also like America in general?
You get to meet some very interesting personality there in High Point. Well, we have some. Yeah, me and my friends would like to call ourselves the Wild Boys. It's really fun to hang out with them. But also you get to meet, well, High Point, just the school itself. It's a private school. It's a liberal arts school. You have a lot of really just rare occasions. It's kind of a very rare case, like in U.S. or even in the world, if we say, because private school, you have a lot of rich kids basically, and you put them in a beautiful campus. You get to see a totally unfamiliar way of living life, and so that really shaped me a lot. Of just seeing, wow, there are people living life like this, and also you have people living so differently than what you have experienced. Yeah.
Sure. You guys get the free steak dinner once a week, right?
Yeah, but you have to. Everybody have to fight for the reservation every Sunday night.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the waiting list.
Yep.
And I guess kind of digging in on that a little bit, with the, excuse me, that maybe big difference between some people who have a lot of affluence and a lot of money and those who are, kind of struggling to get by. Do you think that's kind of the same in China and America, or do you think one maybe country is a little different?
I think it happens all around the world. I always believe that socioeconomic differences exist across all the cultures, and it has always been like that. Yeah.
Okay. No, I would agree. I think it's something that there's always going to be a bit of a gap in a sense. So, all right. So you've been in America for about 2 or 3 years now. What are some of the things that you really like about American culture as compared to perhaps Chinese culture?
Basically, I like how in American culture, you can basically just sit down with people and then introduce to one another, and then instantly, we're now friends. We can talk about business. We can start building a rapport. You can just directly ask people, what are the certain things, that gives you a headache, or, things that I may help you with. That is much more effective. It's more effective communication, other than like in China, you have to. In order to really get to know someone, you have to really spend a long time with them. Well, you have to get to know each other through countless dinner or hangout. And it takes longer to get down to business.
No, I would definitely agree. With my time in China, the definition of a friend, I think, is very different between the two cultures, and how you establish those friendships are also very different. What about in terms of something perhaps you don't like about American culture that you perhaps think China does a little better?
What I don't like about America, well, I don't know. Perhaps a lot of the things that people do, well, the reasoning behind it are originated in like pop culture, and a lot of the things that was produced by middle-aged white male who sit around a pool in some sort of mansion in Beverly Hills. You know, people come up with stuff from their brain, and then next second, you know, everybody start doing that, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like there ain't a lot of culture and a lot of profound thinking behind it, or maybe there are, but just I still didn't quite get it. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does. I definitely think that's been a culture shock whenever I'm in America. Is the top 40 music that everyone listens to, and every month there's a new song that's popular, and every Christmas going to see the new Star Wars movie. All these things that are very interesting, in that perhaps people aren't thinking up their own entertainment as much. All right. So I want to kind of transition. Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
I was just going along.
I want to go ahead and transition perhaps a little bit into some more theoretical and deep conversation. I know you're in anthropology and enjoy talking about philosophy and those kinds of things. So in terms of the idea of power, what do you really think power is?
I think power is the ability to get people to do what you want them to do.
I think that's a very good, concise definition. Then, if that is kind of what power is, why do some people, maybe not everyone, but why do some really enjoy accumulating power?
I think that's just how some people are. I mean, I am one of those. Now I start reflecting on my own life after I receive your questions, and I start to think about it, and then I was like, well, I am one of those. I want to see changes in the world that I think may be better for us human beings in general, or just for me per se. And I would like to see changes happen, and maybe just didn't really get along too well with the current rule in the world.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I think I would agree. I think we both have everyone has their own vision of what they want the future to look like. And certain people take more action on that future. They try to get other people to help them build it, perhaps, and that would be kind of power. How do you get power, do you think? I know you're interested in sales. Do you think getting power is just about selling people on your idea, or what would be the way to gain power?
There are a lot of ways to gain power. But the most effective way to gain power is really it's to win people onto your way of thinking, and that includes ways like you can pay people money, you can pay people to do things, or you can totally convince them by win their trust. That still kind of sounds, just a little weird. Yeah, and that's my sort of an answer, I'll say. Like getting people, just you have to win their trust. You have to compel them into your way of thinking, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Compel's a good word, because I think you can do that by, using logic and kind of convincing someone just based on talking with them. You can kind of bribe them or pay them in a sense, right? If you pay someone enough money, they'll do just about anything. And then you could also use force, so, with a gun to someone's head and make them do it as well. So there's a couple different ways to do it. And I think that kind of leads to a larger theme of centralization versus decentralization of power, and that I guess I wouldn't say my opinion, but my very putting it in black and white type terms, which is not true, because there is a gray area. China is very centralized power, where there's one system controlling everything. America is supposed to be more decentralized, where every single person has the power. Obviously, those are not correct extremes, but where do you think, or what are your thoughts on centralized versus decentralized, and kind of what's the benefit or perhaps the issue with each?
In my opinion, I didn't really see there is much of a difference between how power is distributed in terms of a Chinese culture or an American culture, because after all, you have the powerful, they will connect with one another. I've seen that a lot in the U.S., that powerful people, well, if you're not either wealthy enough or powerful enough, people of a certain level just wouldn't quite give you enough attention on what you have to say, and they usually just totally ignores you. And in China, we kind of did that in a very obvious way by getting a group of people together, and then we just put them into the position of having power and let them decide, what to do, more or less, we as a country as a whole. But in America, you also have these great people, these either great innovators or entrepreneurs. They kind of flex their mental muscle and then get a lot of people doing something together, doing one thing together, and then they start to accumulate their influences on the society, and then sooner or later they get together and either accomplishing greater things, or they kind of decide what the future looks like for America as a country.
Kind of like you mentioned about the pop culture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you have all kinds of popular icons mixed with a bunch of, I don't know, fashion people or big companies like Adidas or Nike, and then you instantly have a bigger sales and everything, and all the products.
Yeah, I think that's you phrased it a really good way, in that one of the issues I've always had with trying to describe China to people is, the stereotype. A lot of Americans think China is this big, bad, evil place. And then there's a lot of Chinese who think America is this great place, which, both sides are a little bit wrong. I think that, like you said, in both countries, there's a small group of people that are going to have a lot of power. And maybe in China, like you said, the obvious way, or it's very easy to see that, okay, these people definitely have the power. But in America, it's perhaps the same thing, but not as obvious. That there is still a small contingent of people who are kind of, whether through business or through government, have accumulated this power and are then kind of controlling a lot of the people's opinions and kind of how things go. So I think that's a good observation. It's something that a lot of Americans still need to open their eyes to, I guess. So you were in America last year for a bit of the election, and you probably saw, especially being in North Carolina, how polarized America can be, and that you have, the Republicans and the Democrats, and it can be very extreme. What's your opinion of that, or what do you think of that based on, an outsider, someone from China's opinion, where, in China there really isn't that public debate in that sense?
My whole idea about election or just public debate into how people raise into power through that way, I don't. A lot of my opinion are from Neil Postman about from his book Amusing Ourselves to Death, and I think it's absolutely true about how he mentioned that nowadays we just have more and more good-looking people or so-called, I'll say, power icon, that they have introduced a lot of other elements than their actual their ability into doing things in a political way, influencing people through the political system. Instead of that, they introduce a lot of other ways. Like, you see, at first you have people like George Washington, you have Lincoln, or people who's very skilled in their words, and you see that they really have what it takes to go through long debate and to really influencing people by making big decisions, and also wise. But after television was introduced to American culture, you have people was able to not just read about what these rival powers are saying, but also seeing them as human beings. Then you have people like Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy, people who's not just skilled in public speaking, but also look good, look like successful people, as what we might think, like a stereotypical successful person. And now you have people like Donald Trump. We all know he's a successful businessman, and he had emphasized a lot on how he's going to make America great again. He's going to bring in good deals for America. He kind of introduced more than just appearance. No. Let me put it this way. So politicians, the definition of politician have been broadened. You first have people who actually can make these people who also look successful. And then now you have people introducing more of a businessman aspect into the politician game, the political game, that you influence people through strategic communication, through marketing yourself. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
No, I think it's important to observe you had a good point about, Reagan and JFK, and it's skipping me right now who JFK was debating, but that was the first televised presidential debate. And it was true. I remember reading about how JFK put on like makeup and, looked really good, and the other guy was kind of sweating under the lights and just looked uncomfortable. And how that really does make a big difference. Your appearance and being able to almost be an actor can influence politics a lot. Being able to put on that show face. Kind of shifting gears a little bit to just kind of talk about some differences between China and America. If you had to, kind of bet on which country would be, let's say on top, for lack of a better word, in about 100 years, I think most people would agree that America has been on top for, about 100 years or so. They took down the British Empire, and then America kind of took over. Do you think that China will surpass America eventually, or do you think America will stay, or perhaps some other country?
I wouldn't. I mean, in my opinion, I think human history, human society, what kind of how the landscape look like are shaped very large based on coincidence. We have a lot of coincidence happens, and that really has a lot to do with who really ended up, I don't know, on top of who. And just my personal opinion would be, I think at the end of the day, everybody is trying to get a better deal for their own people. And from what I see now, I think
I lost you. Can you hear me still?
yeah, I can.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You said, I think, it was the really critical part. Then the sensors cut it off.
Yeah, I just think nobody would like to see, a big war break out, and also it's bad for the economy. Everybody want a better deal, want to live a good life, and with all the traditional Chinese philosophy, it's all about bring harmony, being peace, and let everybody just live their life, and good for the bigger picture. And I can see, I don't think it's necessarily to be, have one leaders on top. I mean, we're maybe looking for different things. Maybe America, maybe in a time like Cold War, it's kind of been hardwired into us that this world kind of needs a strong leadership, and that has to be one country per se. But I think time has changed, and China has something to offer to the world, so as the US, and so as other countries. I mean, the more I learn about the world, I realize we know so less about each other. We have been busy focusing on the differences between one another, and then we get disgust because how American people do things are different from how Chinese people do things. And at first I was like, wow, how can American people, have to put cheese on everything before they put it in their mouth? I get shocked at first over things like this. But then I started to say, and thank God I'm an anthropologist, and instead of saying get disgust over things like that, I get intrigued. I started to ask my friends, and everybody start laughing. They're like, and when they stop laughing, they're like, yeah, we never thought of things like that. And that's when I started to realize, well, everybody has something to offer to the world. And instead of we just, discuss at one another and then say, well, you are you're doing it the wrong way and to assume that I am doing it the right way. Why not we start walking in each other's shoes and, maybe everybody can just sit down at the round table, everybody bring their own, traditional dishes to the table, and instead of getting discussed, let's just say, we withhold our judgment and see if we can appreciate things, let everybody say, let everybody explain why they do things certain ways. Maybe that's good for every one of us. And when we can really appreciate each other culturally, I think that is how we truly united as a species, instead of, say, we're just uniting the Chinese people, or to say uniting the American people.
Yeah, I think that's a very good ideal that we all need to work towards more. Stop seeing ourselves so nationalistically and see ourselves a little more, species-wise. You brought up a really good word that I think a lot of Americans don't understand the meaning of. How would you define harmony in a Chinese sense if you were trying to explain it to someone in America?
Wow, that is a really good question. To define harmony, I would say, in my own word, I would say, whatever gives you a good night's sleep. That kind of a feeling is harmony. I don't think I quite answered the question.
I think I get it a little bit, but I've spent a lot of time in China. I think it is a very difficult concept to explain to a lot of Americans, and I think what you said about, get a good night's sleep, in the sense that, you're not worried about anything, in the sense that you trust, your family and all the people around you, that everyone's safe and, being productive and doing the best they can, and no one is trying to take advantage of you or steal something from you at this moment. But I don't know what you think about that, perhaps.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, I think that's part of what I meant, but more I was kind of thinking about Lao Tzu. He has a very very well-known saying, say that picture this, that you have two small country that has totally different culture, but they were so close that I can hear your dog barking in your yard, and you can smell, what I'm cooking when I'm cooking my dinner. Even though we're so close, but everybody is satisfied, but we're so different in culture, that we wear different clothes, we have different cuisine, we live our life so differently, but we were both satisfied about our own ways of living, that we don't consider. We appreciate each other. We appreciate, how you live your life, how you, show me a different way of doing things. But we never thought about converting into the other way, because we're not satisfied with how we do things.
Sure.
I don't know if that
was
can serve
a
as
good mutual
something.
respect. Yeah, a mutual respect of the cultures, and not trying to force your ideals upon someone else, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of kind of the populations of America and China, who or which one? And I ask a lot. All of my questions are very polarized, black or white. I know there's always gray, but I like to get your opinion. What do you think about which country is more optimistic? The people are more optimistic. Is that America or China?
About optimistic, I think probably, wow. Because living in China, I can see that you have some people who are very optimistic about the future because of all these news that we see about how China is slowly rising into power, and we kind of have a feeling that we will surpass America and eventually replace America as the superpower on this planet. But at the same time, I also see really desperate people that they're working day by day without really having much of a future. I mean, they probably don't realize that. They just feel like, well, their life is kind of, everything seems like being planned by somebody else, that they are doing job for other people, but they cannot really find meaning for their own life. They were too busy working that they really overlook themselves as equal individuals from their boss, with whoever. And also in America, I see people were afraid that, you have China that maybe replace us as the greatest nation on earth, but you also have people who really think America is still great and it will maintain that way. I see both optimistic populations in both countries, and also both nations have people that are not that optimistic about their future.
I would definitely agree. There's both parts on both sides. You mentioned a good point about perhaps in China and also in America there's certain people who they're just barely getting by, or maybe they're not even getting by. And you mentioned a good part about how perhaps someone else is kind of directing their life, or they're working all the time. I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, power, where there's those people who don't have the time or the ability to educate themselves, to kind of think for themselves, are going to end up having to work for someone else a lot more, which can be a more difficult experience perhaps. But I think that would kind of jump into the question of education a little bit. You've gone to school in China and in America. What are some of the biggest differences you see between the two education systems?
Actually, I didn't see much of a difference in the two education systems, because at the end, we're both systems are trying to supply their students a little bit of very practical skills. We teach about our own history. We teach about math. We teach students about foreign language. We teach them something about the world. I don't really think there is much of a structural differences between two systems.
I think I would agree. I think most Americans think it's very different, in that perhaps our education system, the students are more creative, and the Chinese one is better at math and science. I'm not necessarily sure that's true.
Yeah, because I just happen to be not good at it.
Yeah. Here's one example: a Chinese person that is not good at math, and yeah. So I think I think that's something that's interesting. I think a lot of people hear about the Gaokao and they think it's this crazy thing, which I think it's slightly more intense than perhaps the SAT or the ACT, but it's basically the same thing. Where how well you do on that test is going to affect where you get to go to school, and kind of thinking about like school systems and education systems. How do you think those influence ranking people in the sense that if I'm an employer, I'm going to hire someone who went to Peking University over someone who went to a very small school?
So I definitely agree with you on that our education system also served the purpose of ranking people. I mean, but not that much anymore. I think there is a big differences in both culture between a high school degree and a college degree. There's a big jump in terms of pay and also whether you're going to get a job or not, but not that much from college and above. I don't think there's that big of a difference.
I'm not sure about the difference. I do know that you're correct. There's a big difference between high school and college, but I'm not sure about the difference between a master's degree and a bachelor and a PhD.
Yeah, maybe if we're talking about like doing social work with like a sociology degree, maybe getting you maybe a master's degree will probably make a bigger differences in terms of getting job from just a bachelor degree. But and also depends a whole lot on what kind of job we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It definitely makes sense, which certain industries require it more than others. In terms of, describing the hukou system, I think a lot of Americans think that's pretty crazy, but I'm sure you're familiar with how in America you have to go to certain public schools, you have to live in the certain neighborhood. And those certain neighborhoods have, maybe more expensive for the better schools and cheaper for the not so good schools. Do you think that's really any different?
Between the two social systems?
Yeah, between the two systems of how you can, get into a certain school, perhaps.
Yeah, there will be a difference, I think, because maybe just in terms of how I think in China you have more of a geographic kind of we're using a very, I'll say, irrational way to draw this line, while in America, people from a certain socioeconomic group kind of get to maintain their status, their social resources. So I think this is more or less like a structural differences, because all these social rules are influenced more by people who have, let's say, a higher socioeconomic status. But in China, we kind of those people kind of faded into the back, and they just generalize it. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible in either country, or which one perhaps is easier or harder, to kind of move up, as they say, where you can perhaps be born in a lower socioeconomic group and then work your way up?
I don't think it will ever be easy in both countries. I don't even think that's even that likely in both countries.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the word meritocracy?
No, explain that.
So, if I understand it correctly, it's kind of the idea of giving people resources. Give the best people who are most capable the most resources. So I guess in kind of my opinion right now, a lot of countries, if you're born into a more affluent or wealthy family, it's easier to maintain that or get more, because you're able to go to the better public schools, you're able to go to college, you're able to get the master's degree, which opens up certain jobs. But perhaps if you're born in a more impoverished family, you go to a lower school, which makes it more difficult to go to a college, or makes it more difficult to get a better job. That's kind of how I think our current system might be. A meritocracy is based on, no matter who you're born to, if you have the ability, you get the resources, kind of thing. So it's a very idealistic kind of thing, but I think that it's perhaps something that is worth investigating more to see if it's something we could do. But I think the issue with it is the education base at the beginning. Formulating those habits when you're younger. I think both of us have had pretty good parents in the sense that they gave us a chance to, go to good schools, study abroad, kind of learn a lot about the world. And so that makes it easier for us. Perhaps someone else was born in a different family, didn't have those same opportunities. So I think that's something that's, at least for me, I think it's interesting to keep investigating, to see if we can find a way to make education more universal, so then people have more opportunities to get resources. So do you think that most Westerners have a good understanding of China?
I don't, but I don't think that, a lot of the people really know China that well. But I think that is a universal problem that exists. Well, it's a universal problem. I think we don't really know each other that well, just in general.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously, going and living in the other country is a great way to help solve that problem, if it is a problem. If you could pick maybe one or two things that you thought people should try to understand, what would you suggest?
A couple of things Wow. I don't really have I can't really tell you a couple of things that I think that people can understand, because I don't even understand my people now after studying abroad, to be honest with you, because people really behave differently when they know that they are dealing with a Chinese or they're dealing with a foreigner, just to say, and they act so differently. And I'll just say, come see for yourself.
No, I think that's great advice, and come see for yourself. And it's definitely true that people act very differently around foreigners than they do Chinese, their fellow Chinese. So very important. In terms of infrastructure, China and America have different types of infrastructure. Which one do you think is better, and maybe why?
About infrastructure, it's really funny because, yeah, just the past couple of days, I recognized that I always thought China has a better infrastructure, but yeah, I changed that opinion just a couple of days back when I was literally walking in the busiest part, CBD of the city, and I was in a big shopping mall. But yeah, I need to go pee, and I just realized it's so hard to find a bathroom in China. In China, you have really good public transportation, you have a lot of things to do, you have karaoke's, big shopping malls with all kinds of food places and stores that you can go visit, cinema. Everything seems so convenient, but at the same time, it's so hard to find small things like a bathroom, for say. But also in America, you have everything kind of so spaced up, and everything just seemed kind of old because America start urbanization. I don't know, maybe 20, 30, or maybe 50 years before China had started urbanization. So I definitely think there's always up and downs for both sides.
Well, that's very true. You never want to forget the toilet paper either in China. Always keeps them with you.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the biggest culture differences for me too is the use of napkins. In America, the napkins are so bad. They fall apart like the instant you use them once. But you can get so many napkins, right? The restaurant will give you thousands of napkins. But in China, you have to pay for the napkins, but they're very good quality. So I always find that interesting.
Yeah. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So I think we'll maybe do 3 or 4 more questions here. So if you had to think about, some of the big daily life differences which you talked about there, maybe the transportation in the shopping malls. What other? I mean, for me, I'll just give you my opinion. I think WeChat is one of the biggest differences in kind of the daily life, and that you can use it for everything in China. What would you think is kind of a big difference in kind of the daily use between the two countries?
In terms of social media?
Yeah, it could be social media or just kind of like, what's something that you use every day?
So I say, WeChat is definitely one of the bigger things but just in general, you have, in America, power are very kind of centralized into the hand of a handful of individuals. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Snapchat, but in China we have an even smaller group of people that are in power. That is, and then we have the combination of pretty much Snapcash, and if you think we have Snapcash, maybe PayPal and Facebook Messenger, all built into one app, and that is WeChat. And also you have the Chinese version of Twitter, you have the Chinese version of Amazon, all these things. But life is a lot different in terms of technology, and I say it's the same reason as the last questions, like urbanization between China and the US. It's because America has, big round of applause to the American innovators. You guys first come up with all these prototypes of everything, but that makes it harder to build things into like one app or just one thing later on, because they each have like their own owners and they have different vision for their own creation. But in China, since we have American come up with all these new ideas, we kind of just take it and then we make it more convenient. We build it into one things.
Sure.
And yeah.
I think that's a really good observation, and I think a lot of Americans would call that stealing ideas from America. And I would kind of contest that in that, I think it's about riding the wave, and don't be the first person to do something necessarily. The first person to invent something is never the one that wins. Thomas Edison was not the first person to do the light bulb. Many people have done it before. He just kind of peaked at the top perfect point. Same with Facebook. I mean, there was MySpace, right? There was many social networks before Facebook. Facebook just happened to be the best one at the time. So I think that's something that a lot of Americans have to look at, that it's not necessarily stealing ideas. It's just hitting the wave at the right time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we need to kind of wrap up here. So I've got a couple last questions. We've talked about a lot of things here, and sorry we have to cut off a little early today. But are there any questions that I didn't ask that you think I should ask, or any big comments you'd like to bring in?
Yeah, I think about I have a comment I want to make, and that kind of just covered a lot of the things that we touched on today about I kind of answered the questions about harmony, about my vision for the world and the future. Everybody we were growing up in so different cultures, and I just think it's such a great thing to have different perspective on the same world that we live in. You have American culture that emphasize a lot on individuality, on creating new things, and it's also very supporting for new ideas, to come up with new ideas. And that is the gift of American kids, I would say, that they may serve as a innovator in this world that they can get credit from. But in China, our culture actually emphasizes a lot about becoming successful, about getting results. And that's why you see, there is a lot of darker side, I would say. Like, you have to learn how to ride the wave. You gotta learn how to, sometimes muscle your opponents out of the game and things like that. But we should also see that this way of thinking gets life a lot easier for people in China. You have one app, and it basically, wherever you go, that is the only app you need, and that is, I think, the uptick for such trait that we have as Chinese. And I believe it's also that there are also countless different cultures that they also have different things that they may bring to the table. Maybe it's time that we, give them a bigger space to breathe, to really let their culture to preserve and to grow and to shine, instead of kind of just get everybody into the great game of globalization. And by globalization, I mean it's a very kind of a full-scale thing. Especially you have China that is now, exporting a lot of their technology, exporting a lot of their capital into the world and buying a lot of real estate, buying a lot of companies, and you have American exporting a lot of their value through their pop culture, through their sitcom, and I just think maybe we are kind of rushing it a little bit too much. We're kind of trying to squeeze out every last bit of the profit from the market, and I just don't think it's a very good thing, because with more culture exported to other countries, we are influencing how the people how other people think, and to, I don't know, carry on their traditional culture. And I would really want to see more people thinking in terms of their own culture, and hopefully bringing values that different from the Chinese and the Americans, I'll say.
I would definitely agree. I think that's a very good point, and a good pitch for everyone to do. Experience other cultures, but also, represent yours, and take a seat at the table, and we all need to keep working on that. I think that's a great way to cut it off there. One last question, AJax. Is there anyone that you think, who might be interested in talking about these kinds of things that I should reach out to and try to talk with?
I would like to say maybe George Carlin, but he's already dead.
Yeah, he would have been a good one.
Yeah. I don't know. I would like to see you talking with some comedian. I think, with the world getting smaller and smaller by the second, we really need. This world is getting more and more tense, and I would like to see more humor in everybody.
Yeah, that's I think that'd be really cool to interview Jim Carrey, perhaps, or a couple other people. Have you seen the documentary? I think it's "We Can't Take a Joke."
Am I did again?
I think it's called "We Can't Take a Joke." I'll have to look it up. I'll put it in the show notes, and I will email it to you here afterward. But we do have to cut it off for today. So thank you very much, AJax. We will bring you on again soon. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Have a great day.
Oh, make sure you do the same. My day's coming to an end.
Thank you for listening to the ABCs of Psychology, a Ferret Institute production. Please send feedback and join us next time.